This empress's hair wasn't just hair, it was literally her crown. It was a symbol of her power, her family, her control over an entire empire. But what if I told you that same exact hair was also a murder weapon? Agnes of Poitou was one of the most powerful women on earth in the 11th century. She was an empress running the entire Holy Roman Empire, dealing with greedy princes, angry popes, and insane backstabbing at every turn. But the story of how she died is one of the craziest legends I have ever heard. That she was strangled in her bed, not by an assassin, but by her own impossibly long hair. We are going to break down her insane climb to the top and her catastrophic fall. But the craziest part is, this wild story of her death might not be some random accident or a myth. It might be the biggest lie in history, a political cover-up for something much, much darker. To understand how insane this gets, you have to see the world Agnes came from. Born around 1024, she was the daughter of a crazy powerful duke in France. Her family wasn't just rich, they were kingmakers. They built Cluny Abbey, the most important religious site in Europe. Power and politics were her entire life. Her destiny was to be married off for political points, and she was the ultimate prize. In 1043, she married Henry III, the King of Germany, who was about to become Holy Roman Emperor. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a 1,000 IQ power move. This marriage gave Henry a massive alliance, protecting his entire western border. For boldness, she went from a duke's daughter to the queen of Christian Europe overnight. In 1046, the Pope himself crowned her empress in Rome. She was at the absolute top of the world. The Holy Roman Empire was insane. It wasn't one country, but a massive, chaotic mix of kingdoms from the North Sea all the way to Italy. The emperor was basically seen as God's chosen ruler on earth, and the empress was his partner. During her husband's reign, Agnes's influence was huge. Her court was the center of culture, with the best poets, artists, and thinkers on the planet. She was incredibly religious, just like her husband, and pushed for major reforms to clean up the church. She was the perfect empress, and she gave Henry the one thing he needed more than anything: sons. Most importantly, the future Henry IV, born in 1050. For 10 years, she lived an unbelievable life. She was the first lady of the biggest empire, the mother of the next emperor, and a massive celebrity. But her entire world depended on just one person staying alive, and back then, even emperors could die at any moment. In October 1056, the worst possible thing happened. Emperor Henry III died out of nowhere at just 39 years old. The empire was thrown into total chaos. His son, Henry IV, was only 6 years old. In a single moment, Agnes went from a ceremonial empress to the ruler of the entire Holy Roman Empire. She was now the Empress Regent. The challenge she faced was unbelievable. A woman trying to rule in this world was almost impossible. All the powerful dukes who her husband kept under control saw their chance to grab power. Female rulers were basically seen as temporary placeholders until a boy could take over. Agnes had to look strong while everyone was waiting for her to fail. At first, she had some big-time allies, like Abbot Hugh of Cluny and Pope Victor II. With their help, she tried to keep everything running smoothly. And for a little while, it actually worked. She toured the empire, held court, and made decisions like a king. Even the historian Lambert of Hersfeld was impressed with how she handled things. But the pressure was insane. The empire was held together by personal promises, and the promises made to her husband didn't count for her. She was a woman and a foreigner, and the German nobles hated it. They thought she had no idea what she was doing. She tried to buy their loyalty by giving away huge chunks of land and titles to powerful men, hoping to make them allies. This was a massive gamble. These are the exact same guys who would later try to destroy her son. She also made a huge mistake by appointing a new advisor, Bishop Henry of Augsburg. People hated him, and his close relationship with Agnes sparked insane rumors. It didn't matter if they were true. It gave her enemies everything they needed to tear her down. The princes of the empire were furious that some random bishop was influencing the future king. Agnes was completely trapped. She needed loyal people, but if she hired anyone outside the powerful noble families, they accused her of betrayal. She was trying to hold a crumbling empire together, but the foundation was cracking right under her feet. An empress's power is only as good as her friends, and Agnes was about to make a catastrophic mistake that would turn the most powerful force in Europe against her: the Papacy. For decades, the Holy Roman Emperors had been the biggest supporters of church reform. Her own husband had led the charge. Agnes tried to keep this going. When Pope Stephen IX died in 1058, she helped the reformers in Rome get their guy, Nicholas II, elected. It was a huge win, proving she still had massive influence. But that win planted the seeds for her biggest loss. In 1059, Pope Nicholas II dropped a bombshell decree. From now on, popes would only be elected by the College of Cardinals. This was a direct attack on the emperor's power, who had been helping pick popes for generations. The decree basically stripped Agnes and her son of one of their biggest powers. The very movement she supported had just stabbed her in the back. The real crisis exploded in 1061. When Pope Nicholas died, the cardinals elected their own pope, Alexander II, without her. Furious and probably pressured by her nobles, Agnes refused to accept him. Instead, she backed her own candidate, creating an anti-pope Honorius II. It was a terrible, terrible decision. By backing an anti-pope, Agnes turned the Holy Roman Empire from the Church's biggest supporter into its #1 enemy. She literally split Christianity in two. This destroyed her relationship with powerful reformers she had worked with for years. She was no longer seen as a holy regent, but as a political enemy of God. Her power, already weak, started to completely collapse. The German archbishops, led by a guy named Anno of Cologne, saw their chance. They used her disastrous pope picking as proof that she was incompetent and had to be stopped. She had no support from her princes at home and had declared war on the church in Rome. She was totally alone, protecting a boy king. Her enemies started plotting. They decided it was time to take her and her son out of the picture for good. The final straw came in 1062, in an event so insane, it's called the Coup of Kaiserswerth. This wasn't a battle. It was a political kidnapping that would completely destroy Agnes's rule. The masterminds were a group of powerful princes and bishops, led by the ruthless Archbishop Anno II of Cologne. They saw an empress who had made too many mistakes and was advised by someone everyone hated. They decided to steal the ultimate prize, the king himself. Because whoever had control of young Henry IV had control of the entire empire. The historian Lambert of Hersfeld tells a story that sounds like a movie. Agnes and her 11-year-old son Henry were at their palace on an island in the Rhine River. Archbishop Anno showed up, had dinner with them, and then invited the young king to go see a brand new, magnificent ship he had parked nearby. Of course, the boy was excited and ran on board. The second he stepped on the boat, the trap was sprung. Anno's men, who had been hiding, swarmed him. The rowers pushed off into the river. The chronicle says the king was so scared, thinking he was about to be murdered, that he jumped overboard into the freezing river. He would have drowned if one of the kidnappers hadn't dived in and dragged him back on the boat. The kidnapping was a success. They sailed the terrified king to Cologne. Agnes was left on the riverbank, heartbroken and with zero power. Without her son, her legal right to rule was gone. It was over. The kidnappers now had the king and all the imperial regalia, the crown, the scepter, and the holy lance that symbolized control of the empire. The coup sent shockwaves everywhere. Anno and his crew claimed they did it to save the kingdom from a bad female ruler. They took over the government and Henry's education. For Agnes, it was the ultimate defeat. She was outplayed, overthrown, and had her child stolen from her. Stripped of all power, purpose, and her son, Agnes left politics forever. She gave up her regency to Archbishop Anno and decided to retreat from the world. Her life as a ruler was finished. Defeated and disgraced, Agnes of Poitou completely vanished from German politics. The woman who had been empress now looked for peace in religion, not a palace. She ended up in the center of the Christian world, Rome. She showed up in the city in 1065, but this wasn't her disappearing. In a crazy comeback, the failed ruler became a hugely respected spiritual icon. She put herself under the guidance of Peter Damian, one of the most famous theologians on the planet. She swapped her royal clothes for simple robes and dedicated her life to prayer. But Agnes was never going to be just some random nun. Her inside knowledge of the empire and the fact that her son was the king made her incredibly valuable. She soon became a major player in the exact same fight that had destroyed her, the war between the Pope and the Emperor. And in a mind-blowing twist, the man who had opposed her, Hildebrand, was now Pope Gregory VII. And incredibly, he and Agnes became close allies. She became a trusted negotiator between the two sides. She still had access to her son, King Henry IV, and she had the Pope's complete trust. Multiple times, she traveled from Rome all the way back to Germany to try and make peace between her son and the Pope, whose insane fight, the investiture controversy, was threatening to tear the world apart. It's an incredible transformation. The woman who was kicked out of power for her political failures found a new, more powerful kind of influence. She wasn't Empress Regent anymore, but she was the Emperor's mother and the Pope's secret weapon. For over a decade, she lived this double life, a religious woman in Rome, who was also one of the most important diplomats in the world. The historical record is crystal clear. She lived a pious life, was respected by everyone, and worked for peace. On December 14th, 1077, Agnes of Poitou died in Rome. She was buried in St. Peter's Basilica, the holiest place in Western Christianity. By every credible account, she died peacefully. And that should have been the end. But it wasn't. Because around this quiet, documented death, a bizarre and terrifying legend started to spread. History tells us Agnes died a peaceful death, but the legend tells a much crazier story. The legend, which has zero evidence from her time, claims the former empress didn't die of old age. Instead, she was found dead in her room, strangled by her own impossibly long and beautiful hair. This is the biggest mystery of her story. Where did a story this bizarre come from? It's not in any of the official records. It's not in any of the chronicles. It's a ghost story, a medieval myth that attached to her name long after she was dead. To understand this legend, you have to understand the symbolism. Back then, a woman's long hair meant everything. It could symbolize glory and nobility, but it could also symbolize vanity and temptation, everything a religious woman was supposed to give up. For a woman's hair to literally become her murder weapon, is a crazy and powerful image. It suggests her death was unnatural and twisted. One theory is that the story is a warning about vanity. The empress, who was so proud of her beautiful hair, was literally killed by it. It's a story warning against the fame and glory Agnes once had. Another possibility is that it represents her political career. The hair, her crown, was the symbol of her power as regent. For that same crown to strangle her is a powerful metaphor for her political career. It suggests the power she had is what destroyed her in the end, that she was choked by a job she was never allowed to actually do. The legend turns her into a victim of a cruel fate, not a political coup. The story is popular because it sounds like a dark fairy tale, but it is almost certainly fake. So why was it told? The answer is probably politics. The legend of the hair wasn't just a story, it was a weapon. The legend of Agnes being strangled by her hair is a lie. But lies, especially in politics, are created for a reason. This insane story was probably a cover-up for a much darker political truth, a story made to change how people remembered the past. The only question is, who benefited from this story? There are two main theories. The first is that the legend was created by the same men who overthrew her to destroy her reputation forever. The Coup of Kaiserswerth was treason. Archbishop Anno and his friends had to justify it. By making Agnes seem like a bad ruler, they could look like heroes. The story of her being strangled by her hair does this perfectly. It frames her as a victim of her own female weakness and vanity, suggesting a woman that obsessed with beauty was never fit to rule. It's a brilliant piece of propaganda that shifts all the blame from the kidnappers to their victim. But there's another, equally crazy possibility. What if the story was made up not by her enemies, but by her supporters? After she died, a lot of people felt bad for Agnes. Her son, Henry IV, was in a lifelong war with the same exact people who took down his mother. For his supporters, changing Agnes's story could be a huge political weapon. In this version, the legend isn't an insult. It's a way to make her a martyr. It takes her quiet death and makes it tragic and sensational. It erases the fact that she was kicked out of power and replaces it with this bizarre, almost holy suffering. She's no longer a failed politician. She's a tragic hero, a beautiful empress whose life ends in a cruel, unnatural way. This story makes you feel pity and horror, framing her as an innocent martyr destroyed by a wicked world, and a symbol of the injustice her son was still fighting against. Either way, the legend does the same thing. It rewrites history. It covers up the messy truth of a political overthrow with a simple, powerful, and emotional myth. The real story of Agnes's fall was about bad political moves, shifting alliances, and the insane ambition of her rivals. But the legend makes it all about her. It makes it about her hair, her vanity, her fate. It's a much better story, and that makes it much more dangerous. The life of Agnes of Poitou is an insane roller coaster of victory and disaster. She went from French nobility to Empress of the Holy Roman Empire. She ruled that empire, only to be taken down by her own subjects. Then she completely reinvented herself as a holy woman and peacemaker between her son and the Pope, and died peacefully in Rome. So, was her hair her crown and her murder weapon? The answer is yes and no. The story of her being strangled is 100% a myth. Her death was quiet. Her burial was sacred. But the legend itself is the weapon. It's a political tool used to either murder her reputation or turn her into a saint. The story of her hair became a narrative that powerful men used for their own agendas long after she died. It's a crazy reminder that, in the fight for history, the most exciting story often wins, even if it's not true. Agnes of Poitou's real story isn't about some freak accident. It's a story about how hard it is for a woman to have power in a world run by men. Her crown was real, but it came with conditions. And when she was overthrown, the story of her hair, the symbol of her womanhood, was twisted into a lie to either justify what they did to her or turn her into a legend. Her hair wasn't the literal weapon that killed her, but the legend about it was used to kill the truth, leaving us with a ghost story that has hidden the real, political tragedy of the Empress, who lost literally everything. If you thought this dive into historical scandals and political drama was insane, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories about forgotten figures and hidden truths. And don't forget to like this video. It helps us dig up even more stories from the past. Thank you for watching.